This king fought crusades with leprosy. The year is 1174 AD. The place is the Kingdom of Jerusalem. The ruler is a young boy named Baldwin, who at age 13 is now the king of one of the smallest crusader states in the Holy Land. But while he's young and no one dares to defy him, he has leprosy. And by the time he's 28, his entire face will be eaten away by the disease. So this crusader king had only one shot. He needed to launch a holy war against the Muslims and claim victory before he lost his mind and his body to leprosy. Welcome to my channel. Today we will meet the most unfortunate leper in history and find out how he managed to wage a crusade, even though he was literally crumbling to pieces. In the year 1162, the Kingdom of Jerusalem ruled over less than 2,000 square miles of land in the Middle East. They were surrounded by Muslim rulers who often attacked them. So it's no wonder that when King Amalric I died in 1174, his successor would be a 13-year-old boy, Baldwin, who would need his mother, Queen Isabella, to rule in his stead. When he took the throne, he was already sick with leprosy, which causes the body to slowly rot away. It's a very slow process, but by the time he was an adult, his face was almost completely eaten away. Now, he didn't look like the typical leper that we might imagine today, because back then, leprosy was treated with the utmost secrecy and discrimination. If someone was diagnosed with the disease, they were usually kept hidden away from society so as not to cause panic. In some cases, lepers were even killed. Leprosy is caused by a type of bacteria called Mycobacterium leprae. This bacteria slowly breaks down the sufferer's nerves, causing numbness and paralysis in the affected areas. Over time, this can lead to disfigurement and even death. There is no cure for leprosy, but it is possible to control its symptoms with modern medicine. Now let's get back to Baldwin. Despite his illness, Baldwin wanted to live a normal life. He hunted, rode horses, and did his best to ignore the fact that he was slowly rotting away. But he also knew that he needed to do something about his appearance if he wanted to be taken seriously as a medieval monarch. So he went to see the most learned doctors in Europe, but none of them could help him. However, they all agreed that his best chance of survival was to move to a warmer climate. And so, in 1180, Baldwin set sail for the Kingdom of Jerusalem and became known as the Leper King. It wasn't easy being a leper in the Middle Ages. Not only was the disease seen as a curse, but lepers were also heavily stigmatized. People believed that lepers were cursed by God and that they could spread their disease just by touching someone. This led to a lot of fear and prejudice against lepers. But despite all the hardships he faced, Baldwin refused to give up hope. He continued to pray for a cure, and he never stopped believing in God. His faith was unwavering, and it helped him to endure through the worst of his leprosy. Meanwhile, in the Holy Land, the Muslims were becoming restless under the rule of the Crusaders. They had grown tired of being oppressed and they wanted to fight back. When Baldwin took the throne, he was determined to make things right. He wanted to show the Muslims that the Crusaders were not a threat to be feared and that they could coexist peacefully. But his efforts were met with violence, and soon he found himself at war. One day, while Baldwin was out hunting, he was attacked by a group of Muslims. He managed to escape, but he was badly wounded. As he lay dying, he cried out for help. His mother, Queen Isabella, heard his cries and rushed to his aid. She saved his life, but she also realized that her son was cursed. As Queen Isabella looked over her leprosy-ridden son, she knew that he needed more than just medical treatment. He needed hope. And so she turned to God in prayer. She asked for a miracle to heal her son, and God answered her prayer. A hermit named Brother Thomas came to visit Baldwin and told him that God had chosen him to be the new king of Jerusalem. He said that Baldwin was not cursed, but blessed, and that he would be a great king. Brother Thomas's words gave Baldwin hope. He believed in God again, and he felt that he had a purpose in life once again. With the support of his mother and the hermit, Baldwin recovered from his wounds and took the throne. He became a good and just ruler, and he made efforts to improve the lives of his people. But as time went on, his leprosy got worse. By the time he was 28 years old, his face was so disfigured that he couldn't even recognize himself. But he was still determined to fulfill his destiny as the king of Jerusalem. In 1183, when Baldwin was only 21, the Muslim leader Saladin seized Jerusalem and forced the Crusaders to flee. This was a devastating blow to the Crusaders, and it seemed as though their efforts to hold on to the Holy Land were in vain. However, Baldwin was not one to give up. He rallied the remaining Crusaders and prepared to fight back. Despite his disfigurement, Baldwin was a brave and determined warrior. He led his troops into battle and fought against the Muslims with all his strength. Unfortunately, leprosy was taking its toll on his body, and he began to lose his sight. Still, he refused to give up. On June 1187, Baldwin and his army faced off against Saladin's forces in the Battle of Montisar. Baldwin, who was blind in one eye and only had partial vision in the other, directed his knights in the battle with a white flag bearing a red cross, which was a symbol of Jerusalem's royal family. Although outnumbered 7-1, the Crusaders won a decisive victory, inflicting heavy casualties on the Muslims. Some accounts say up to 10,000 Muslims were killed, while Crusader losses were only 300. This victory halted Saladin's advance and secured the northern part of the kingdom. Following the battle, Baldwin returned to Jerusalem and continued to rule as the king of the Crusader state. But his leprosy continued to worsen. By 1189, his health had deteriorated significantly. He suffered from ulcers, blindness, and paralysis, and he was unable to carry out his duties as king. On March 11th, 1185, Baldwin the Less, the last king of Jerusalem from the house of Courtenay, died at the age of 32. His passing marked the end of an era in the history of the Crusades. After Baldwin's death, the kingdom of Jerusalem fell into decline. The Crusaders were unable to hold on to their territory, and eventually they were forced to flee. But Baldwin's legacy lived on. His courage and determination in the face of adversity inspired people for centuries to come. While leprosy is a terrible disease, Baldwin's story shows us that it doesn't have to define us. He was more than his illness. He was a brave warrior, a good king, and a man of faith. His story is a reminder that we should never give up hope, no matter how difficult our circumstances may seem. So what can we learn from the Leper King? Firstly, we see the importance of facing our fears head-on. Leprosy was a terrifying disease, and it's understandable that Baldwin was afraid of it. But rather than letting fear control him, he chose to take action. He sought out the best medical care available, and he never gave up hope for a cure. Secondly, Baldwin's story reminds us that we're not defined by our illnesses. Leprosy had a devastating impact on his life, but it didn't define him. He was more than his illness, and he should be remembered for his courage and determination. Finally, Baldwin's story teaches us the power of faith. Despite the suffering he endured, Baldwin never lost his faith in God, and he believed that he had a purpose in life. This gave him the strength to keep going when things were tough. If you want to know more about the Crusades, stay tuned for more information. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.